We can now speak to former US ambassador to the United Nations and former national security advisor under President Donald Trump, John Bolton. John, thank you so much for joining me. As we've just been saying, Trump and Putin will speak on the phone as Zelensky repeats his message that only Russia wants war. What will be on Trump's wish list when he does talk to Putin?
Well, I think he's trying to find out what Putin's real conditions are to agree to the ceasefire that Trump wants. And Putin comes into this with a lot of momentum. He delayed having the call until he had Trump's envoy come to Moscow so that he could meet with him for several hours to pump him for everything that he could to find out what Trump's positions were. And I think Putin believes that former KGB agent that he is, that he can manipulate Trump, and he'd much rather talk directly to Trump than have this negotiated by lower-ranking envoys or even foreign ministers. So I think Putin is looking for more concessions. Trump has already made many, many concessions on Ukraine's behalf against Ukraine's wishes, and I think Putin thinks he can get even more directly from Trump.
John, since Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire, the fighting and the killing has continued. You just touched on it there, but what further pressure can America put on Russia to ensure a 30-day ceasefire is actually agreed upon? And can Putin manipulate Trump?
Well, I think the answer to the second question is the more important, because I think that's very likely to happen. We'll see after the call. I don't think there's going to be an immediate breakthrough. One of the things that Putin has said is there are a lot of operational questions that need to be resolved before there's a ceasefire, which is correct. That's why ceasefires are normally negotiated between the combatant parties to avoid mistakes and blunders in the field. And none of that has happened yet. So I think Trump is rushing to make this deal because I think he still thinks he can get the Nobel Peace Prize this year, and he doesn't want to wait much longer. It doesn't have anything to do with the strategic realities. It has to do with the role of Donald Trump.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer now expects more than 30 countries to be involved in the coalition of willing to help protect Ukraine. What could a peacekeeping force actually do? And will the US join this coalition? You have said there that Donald Trump is rushing. What flags does that basically bring up?
Well, Trump has basically said, among other things, that there's no prospect of NATO membership for Ukraine. There won't be any NATO security guarantees for Ukraine. There won't be any U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine. I think it's very unlikely he'll want to participate, even indirectly, in a peacekeeping force. And something that I hope the Europeans are considering, although I haven't seen it in the public press, is what exactly do they think the mission of the peacekeeping force is? Is it to prevent violations of the ceasefire? That is to say, are they prepared to engage in combat against one party who breaks the ceasefire? Or is it a peacekeeping mission more along the lines of UN peacekeeping, where the peacekeeping force is allowed to use force only in self-defense? And so it reports violations, it watches the violations happen, but it doesn't actually do anything about the violations. Those are two very different models for a peacekeeping force, and it's not clear to me the Europeans have decided which they're pursuing.
John, I just want to shift gears slightly, but drawing on your negotiation experience, why do you believe taking a scathing stance against the Houthis is essential for global security, particularly in limiting Iran's influence and preventing further destabilization in the region? We've obviously seen those US attacks on the Houthis over the weekend and today.
Well, I think these attacks are long overdue. I mean, the Houthis are a terrorist proxy group for Iran. There's no doubt about it. They were part of the Ring of Fire strategy against Israel, which hasn't worked out too well. And so this is reducing the Houthi capability, I think, both in terms of closing the Suez Canal, Red Sea maritime passage, but also the power that the Houthi wage inside Lebanon is very important. the freedom of the seas argument here goes to a core element of American foreign policy since before we were a nation. That we don't permit freedom of the seas. Our first war in the Middle East region was against the Barbary pirates during Thomas Jefferson's administration when they kept capturing American merchant ships. So this goes back a long way, and I hope that the Houthis can be broken, and I think their supply chain from Iran is the place to start.
John, one final thought. How's Donald Trump doing so far, do you think?
Well, I think he's succeeding by his lights, but he's causing the United States enormous damage. The trade war that is erupting because of his tariffs, the damage done to NATO because of his reversal of position on Ukraine, moving from supporting Ukraine to supporting Russia is going to be terribly destructive, and other things developing around the world. I'm very concerned about it.
John Bolton, former US ambassador to the United Nations and former national security advisor, thank you for joining me and thank you for bringing your insights.
Thanks for having me.